Good morning, YouTube, BookTube. This is Johnny. Thought I'd make a video since it's a Sunday morning here in Southwest Michigan. It is 10:07 in the morning. It is December the 29th, coming to the end of December, end of another year in human history, American history. And I thought, I'm sitting here alone. My wife went to church this morning. And I'm sitting here alone. Well, I'm not, like I said, I'm never alone. I'm always in the presence of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And as my my habit is I'm writing in my paper diary. I'm on page 1094 this morning for the year 2024. And I mentioned the other morning that I was going to read for devotions this commentary on the Psalms. So I'm reading this morning. The Psalms, the Christ-Centered Commentary, Volume 2. Volume 1 is Introduction to the Psalms, and this is from Psalms 150 to Psalm 1 to Psalm 50, and this is it. This morning I'm reading on Psalm 19. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. That's Verse 7 of Psalm 19, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. So I'm reading this commentary on that this morning for devotions. And basically what, I'm sitting here and I just want to talk to somebody. There's nobody to talk to. One time recently I was talking to my psychologist, and who I see next month on the 7th. I said to him, usually in 1 year I talk to 3 or 4 people. Now I talk to you guys in these videos, and I talk to people in my online diary, Crooked Fingers, but face-to-face conversation with people is very rare with me, except I talk to my wife almost every day. But I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with somebody. I mean, really sit down and talk. Like my wife, she's always gone visiting friends, going out for breakfast with girlfriends, and they'll talk for 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with someone that was 2 or 3 hours. Even a half hour, I can't remember. So I'm basically, what I do is I make these videos to talk to someone. It's like I was watching that news show the other night about AI robots, that people in the future will have these robots that they will talk to, and people can talk to now, to AI. That seems kind of spooky to me. Now this morning, I had a time of prayer. I talked to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I prayed, lift up my voice to the Lord, because I've been going through, I keep mentioning I haven't been feeling well lately, and feeling this dark depression and feeling kind of freaked, which I haven't really felt this bad and since that episode I had 3 years ago, when I started seeing a psychologist and started taking Xanax. And I don't know what it is. Is it the end of the year? Is it the weather? My body aches. I have rheumatitis. I think in my right foot. Many years ago when I was working at the Hamilton Farm Bureau and Egg Division, I damaged my right foot. It's hard to explain, but I twisted it really bad, and I was out of work for 3 months. And every time, once in a while, that right foot gets really pain, and I think I'm getting rheumatitis in it. So the point is that I'm feeling depressed, a very dark, oppressive depression, and I'm feeling pain in my body. And and the other night when I was walking our son's dog Ollie, we watched him for a couple of days because our son and his family went to spend Christmas with his wife's family here in Michigan. And as I was walking Ollie, Carol can't walk the dog at night because so I walked the dog at night. And as I was walking, I hadn't walked in a long time, and I really had a very difficult time walking just around the block. And it was very apparent that I've gotten old. And it was kind of a shock to my system. I'm no longer a young man. Now, some of you guys have commented on that video that I'm not really old, and it's probably true. Now, my grandfather died in his 60s. Carol's dad died in his 60s. But now, old age, I mean, people live in their 80s and 90s now. And people work up until their 70s. But it was a shock to me, and maybe it kind of threw me. And that's why I made that video about the brevity of life. And going back to that video, I was talking about giving you a chronological order of my life, but I failed to mention that when we moved up here, I got my timeline out. I told you I have a timeline. Like it says here, 1952, born August the 14th in Oakland, California. But I was looking at this timeline, and we left Houston, Texas in 1991 to move to Holland, Michigan, where we live now. And I was 39 years old. And in 1992, I was 40 years old. Then in 1993, I got that job at the Hamilton Egg Division hauling eggs off trucks. And I was 41 years old. And that's why I wanted to mention that when we moved to Holland, we went to a CRC, a Christian Reformed Church. But it wasn't really, in those days I was very Calvinistic, and we were very Reformed. And we couldn't find a church in Holland that was really Calvinistic and conservative, psalm singing, very conservative. But we found out about a group of people in Overijssel, which is near Holland. It's a farming community. That these 10 families wanted to start a church, and they were having a meeting at Overijssel Township Hall. So Carol and I, we went to this meeting to meet these people who wanted to start a conservative, Calvinistic, Reformed church. And so we went to that meeting, and we became founding members, founding families. There were 15 families, and we started a church called Messiah Independent Reformed Church out in Overijssel. First we met in a school, and then we built a church out there in Overijssel, which is just not far from where we live. And so we were part of this church. We didn't have a minister at that time. We had ministers come in from different conservative Calvinistic churches to preach. And eventually we did call a minister. And he was with us for 10 years. So when we started Messiah Independent Reformed Church, I was on all these committees, and I taught adult Sunday school. That was one of the things I could do. I taught, the first couple of years, I taught systematic theology. And everybody in the church, these families, knew I had gone to seminary, I had gone to Bible college. And there were other elders who taught the Bible and taught classes besides me, other elders, because they taught catechism classes to the high school and the children, Heidelberg Catechism, and there were Sunday school classes, but I taught the class on systematics. And I don't know how many years, and then I eventually wanted to teach the Bible, because I realized, we started Messiah Independent Reformed Church because we wanted to preach and teach the Bible. And so I thought that's what we should emphasize. Now, someone else took over the classes on teaching the theology. I started teaching the Bible. And not only, I had another elder, we would take turns. I would teach 2 Sundays, and then he would teach 2 Sundays, and then I would teach 2 Sundays. And we went through different books of the Bible. We went through the book of Acts, we went through Luke, 1st and 2nd Peter, we went through Hebrews, different books of the Bible. And so we were members of that church for 10 years. And as I was teaching the Bible, I began to find things that I didn't agree with in the Reformed faith, Orthodox Dutch covenant theology. And so when I came to that realization, since we were a confessional church, meaning that you could not teach or preach anything contrary to the Heidelberg, the Belgic, and the Canons of Dort, you couldn't hold office and you couldn't teach or preach unless you were in agreement with the Dutch Reformed confessions. And so when I disagreed or came to not agree with the 3 forms of unity, the Heidelberg, the Canons of Dort, and the Belgic, I had to stop teaching Sunday school classes because I was considered unorthodox. I just didn't hold no longer to Dutch Reformed sacramental theology. I didn't hold to Dutch classical covenantal theology. And those things disqualified me from teaching. So, and after a couple of years, we stayed in the church, but I was uncomfortable because I didn't agree with this church, and there were other reasons I became dissatisfied with the church: lack of pastoral care, lack of spiritual oversight, other controversies I won't go into in this video. So we left. By that time our kids were in college, and we started going to a Presbyterian church in America, which Carol has gone to for over 23 years. And she's a member there. That's where she goes in the morning. Now, when I was in seminary at Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi, I was going to be ordained in the Presbyterian Church in America. So when we left Messiah, we went to the Presbyterian Church in America here in Holland. Now, the minister at that time had left the Christian Reformed Church over liberalism, and he was the minister of the PCA church. He's not there now. He passed away a number of years ago. But the minister at that time at the PCA was a minister that Carol had when she was a girl. He had been Christian Reformed, but he had left the CRC and gone into the Presbyterian Church in America, which is very conservative, evangelical, confessionally reformed. So she knew him. That was Reverend Van de Havel, and she even babysitted for his kids when she was a girl. So she wanted to go to the PCA. So we went to the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, but they were still doctrinally like the Belgic and the Cans of Dort and the Heidelberg Catechism are the Dutch Reformed confessions, and they're same as the Presbyterian Church confessions, the Westminster Standards, the larger and shorter catechism. So there's not really any doctrinal differences between the Dutch Reform and the conservative Presbyterian Calvinists. And so I still couldn't join the church, the PCA, because I was still in doctrinal disagreement. So I couldn't join, I couldn't stand up before the congregation in the PCA and swear before God that everything that was in the Westminster Standards was biblical, because they held to the same doctrines that of the Dutch Reform as far as covenant and sacraments. And also there was the same problem. There was no spiritual oversight. There was no pastoral care. The preaching was very, very shallow. The minister was very, just like an old Baptist revivalist kind of preacher. He wasn't even that concerned with being Calvinistic. So I left the church, and let me see, I left the church in 2006, stopped going to a visible church, and I was 54 years old. Now Carol, she stood up in the PCA church and she swore before God that everything in the Westminster Standards was biblical, even though she agreed with me. And I found that very painful. But I have realized that Carol grew up, her whole life Carol has gone to church. Carol grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, and she's always, her spirituality is church. Going to church every Sunday, she's done her entire life. Not only just, she goes to morning and evening services, she goes to Sunday school, she's on the women's board of ministry at her church, she does calling, she's really very active in her church. Now when I was involved in churches before I left, I was also very involved in churches because I wanted to be a gospel minister. I went to Bible college, I went to seminary, I wanted to be ordained, I wanted to be a gospel minister. I wanted to spend my life teaching and preaching the Bible and taking care of souls, evangelism and visiting those. Like when I was in Bible college, I was a jail chaplain. When I did my internship in Texas, every month with another guy, we visited people, young Christians on death row in Huntsville, Texas. And so I've always been concerned with visiting people in hospitals and prisons and doing street evangelism, door-to-door evangelism. But that all came to an end in 2006 because I couldn't exercise my spiritual gifts anymore, because I wasn't theologically reformed classically. And so, and since I'm very conservative and Calvinistic, most 95% of the churches in America are not Calvinistic. They're not conservative. They're not psalm singing. They don't go by the regulative principle when it comes to worship. The theology is, in my view, unbiblical. I'm not Pentecostal. I'm not Methodist. I'm not Catholic. I'm not non-denominational. I'm not Baptistic. I'm not Plymouth Brethren. I'm not into social justice. I'm not into choirs or Christian rock bands. I'm not into special music. I am into a very primitive church kind of view. I mean, I go back to the New Testament, there in the Pauline epistles. So we went to that church for Messiah for 10 years, and in 2006 we left. Well, Carol and I left, and the kids were gone by that time. And then in 2007, I was 55 years old, and I stopped working at the Hamilton Farm Bureau. I got fired. I got fired because they were under the Hamilton Farm Bureau was under new management. They fired everybody that I had worked under for years. They hired new management, and they started saying I had to work 50 to 60 hours a week. And I said I was only hired to work 40 hours a week. And I could work 45 hours a week, but I didn't want to work on weekends. I didn't want to work 60 hours a week. And they just said, okay, you're fired. They fired me. Now remember, most of the people I worked with at the Hamilton Farm Bureau were Asians and Latinos, and they had no problems working 50 to 60 hours a week. But I told them I have another life. I have a spiritual life. I have a family life. I have, back then I was, I believed in not working on Sunday. But they wouldn't listen to me. So I left, and then Carol said, well, just stay home. The kids were gone. They had finished college. They were off pursuing their careers, and so I've been home since 2007. So yeah, I was really involved. I've always been involved in churches, especially since 1975. So that's why I'm not going to church right now, because I'm not classically Calvinistic, sacramental, covenantal, classical theology. I'm just into the Bible. And that's kind of ironic, because you would think that Christians would want to just be into the Bible. But every church has a theological system. They have a view of eschatology, a view of baptism, a view of covenant, a view of what it means to live the Christian life. And I just don't fit anywhere. And so what I do is I just seek to live every day unto God. I seek to live a holy, Christ-centered life. So that's what I do. So I read, every morning I study the Bible, I read the Bible. I seek to live a life of prayer, a life of devotion. And every day is holy, every day. But I still struggle with sin. I still struggle with depression, anxiety, feeling rejected by the world, well, I don't care about being rejected by the world, but being rejected by the church, whatever that means, because I don't know what the church is. I can't go find it. I can't call up the church on the telephone. So I kind of live in a state of unknowingness, a cloud of unknowingness. And so this morning, like I said, I'm reading on Psalm 19, and I'm writing in my paper diary, reading Meditations on the Life and Passion of Christ by Joan Tauler. I got this book in the mail yesterday. I mentioned I've been watching the videos on YouTube, Just and Sinner. the lectures of a very evangelical Lutheran pastor, theologian, Gordon Cooper. I got his book on union with Christ, salvation as participation yesterday. He's doing a series on theology. This is contemporary Protestant Scholastic theology. And I didn't mention this book. I had been reading the works of the Reverend William Bridge. He was a Puritan who lived from 1600 to 1670. And I've been reading his sermons on the spiritual life in this volume, The Spiritual Life and in being of Christ and all believers in 5 sermons. So I've been reading that. So I'm on sermon 2 on the spiritual life. So I've been reading those along with other books. And I still been reading the Trinity and the Canon, Biblical, Theological, and Practical Proposal, and edited by Brandon M. Smith. So yeah, and I did go, yesterday Carol and I went to Blue Stockings bookshop. They had a $1 bag sale. I bought $1 worth of books in the bag. And one of them I bought yesterday was a novel by Cynthia Ozick, and I've been reading it, a very small little novella, The Messiah of Stockholm. So I've been reading that. And I've been reading The Philosophy of Walking by Frederic Gros. I did get this book in the mail. I didn't know if I mentioned it. Desert Divers by Sven Lindqvist. He wrote a book I showed you, The History of Bombing. This is on colonialism in Africa. It's kind of like a travel memoir about colonialism there of European countries there in Africa. And I've been reading The Librarianist by Patrick deWitt. It's a novel. So I just thought I'd kind of tell you more about my personal history and tell you about my struggles. I've always struggled with depression, anxiety, insecurity, dread. That's why I take Xanax, and now I see psychologists and pray. So yeah, I'm having a dark time, a hard time. So I just keep hanging in there. I don't know what's causing it. The end of the year, the inauguration of a president that I think is very wicked. I look at the war in Ukraine. I look at the war in the Middle East. I look at what's going on in Washington, D.C. between the MAGA Republicans and the Democrats. And I look at the homelessness, and I look at the world, and everything just seems so bad that it gets to me. And I don't know why. Some people can just go through this world, then go through their day-to-day just having a jolly good time. I can't. I just always been socially aware, politically aware, spiritually aware since I was in high school. Like I said, when I was in high school, I was in the ecology movement. I was in the anti-war movement, the free speech movement. And then I became a Christian and when I was 18 years old and wanted to bring souls to Jesus, and I wanted to devote my life to helping people. That's why I worked on a rescue mission. I worked on Skid Row, work among the poor. And then I wanted to devote my life helping people, just Christians, grow in grace and the knowledge of the Lord. And now here I am, going on 73 years old and I'm growing old and I'm going to die. So I'll sign. Until next time, May the Lord bless.